It's good living on the edge. 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 Living on the edge of his soon returning, trusting in his promise. Should I really believe it? All his words fulfilling like he said. Living on the edge where the living is easy. Faith is getting stronger. Nothing here to hold me. I can see the lights of home ahead. Living on the edge. Living on the edge. It's good. Living on the edge. It's good. Living on the edge. It's good. Living on the edge.
Good afternoon. My name is Donna Feazell, and we are with Living on the Edge with Donna and Frankie. Your host right here, Frankie King. Hey, Frankie, how's your day today?
Good. How about you?
Busy, crazy busy. I've been with this guy right here all day long.
I watched part of it, that show.
Yeah. And so I'll let you do the introductions.
Well, actually, Bob and I go a long way back.
Long way.
Bob was a teacher at the Baraka class at First Baptist at Fort Payne for how many years, Bob?
36 years.
36 years. And I knew him back then, and so glad to have him back on the show today. He just came from the radio station in Scottsboro, Z13, and Bob French is with us today.
Glad to be here. I'm glad to be anywhere. Green side up. Green side up.
That's exactly how you look at it. Absolutely. Well, that's my dog timer going off.
That's what my
Sorry.
lady has. She has a dog barking for her ringer.
Oh, so she must like dogs too.
Oh, she fights me over my dog, which she says is her dog.
I know the feeling.
She keeps him as much as she can.
Oh,
She lives on the lake up in Harrison, Tennessee.
oh yeah.
Widow of a judge, a friend of mine. I've known her 35 years. And we knew them, and he's been gone about 10 years.
And I knew his wife Celeste, and I loved her so much, and she was so good to talk to. I actually got to work with her at the hospital, and just a terrific lady.
Yeah, we only had one fight, and it lasted 35 years.
I knew he was going to say that. I somehow knew he was
Well,
gonna
that was how do you raise children?
Uh,
And she wanted to raise them with a silver spoon, and I wanted them to
I
be a
can
little
see
bit
that.
hard scrabble.
Uh-huh.
Oh, yeah. And she wanted them to have everything she didn't have,
Right.
and I wanted them to work like I had to.
She had a kind heart.
Yeah, she really did. I joke about that. That's the only thing we disagreed on.
Yeah. I
We
can see
never
that.
we never had a fight or argument. I live by the rule. I'll try to make more money than she can spend. And
You hear that, don't you, Ronnie?
well, but she was a shopper, and therein lies a story that's in my book. If you got time, I'll tell it.
I'm waiting on him to tell. He's been telling Frankie all these
Well,
things when we got in this
Do you
afternoon.
care if I show this?
No, you
Okay.
okay.
See, Frankie's the pick.
We just go way back. What he's talking about, he is writing another book, and he already has
3 are out.
3 books out, and he says he's got 12 others. I think he
Yeah,
said
I've got
that's-
12 already written.
Anyway, this is going to be the newest book, and what is it called?
Call me Herman.
Okay.
Now, why Herman?
All right.
And this is the handsome little boy right there. That's Bob right there.
Poor child. But anyway, how I got the name Herman. we had in history at Decatur when I was in the 10th grade, we had actually the 11th grade. The teacher ordered us to read these books on the Western United States. I read Cimarron by Edna Ferber. This other guy read the book Henry French, Indian Fighter. Everybody in Decatur, every boy, had a nickname. We had such nicknames as Lardy, Mule Gut, stuff like that. Well, anyway, so this guy always they were calling me various names because I wouldn't put up with Bobby or Bob. My name was Robert Jr. And they were trying to come up with a nickname for me for the longest time. And he would always comb his hair. And back then you put tiger oil on your head, hair oil. Yeah. And so he would be always combing his hair, and his name was McCoy. So I said, "You're nothing but Pretty Boy McCoy." Well, some heard it, and they started it and started calling him Pretty Boy McCoy. Oh, it just got away with him so bad. And so he got up to give his book report on Henry French, Indian Fighter. And he got so confused, he called it Herman French. And he was giving a whole book report and everything on Herman French. And finally the teacher said, "Well, that's not the name of it." He said, "Well, my problem is with Herman the German over here."
Herman the German.
Pointing at me. So everybody picked that up, and they called me Herman from then on. If you go back to Decatur today and say, "You know Robert French or Bob French or Bobby French?" "No, I've never heard of him." "What about Herman the German?" "Oh, Herm, yeah, we do him." So anyway, the funny thing about it is I tried to live it down. There was no way. And when I worked at the Capitol Theater, they said that you had to take 2 sticks to watch a show, one to prop up a seat and the other to beat off the rats. And my best friend Roland, who we talked about earlier, was the manager. And I worked next door at Elmore's as a stock boy. And when I got off work at 5, I'd go over and work for him as an usher and a popcorn boy. And so they coined another name for me.
I'm afraid that this is a clean show.
Oh yeah. They called me Herman the German, the Great Capital Rat Chaser.
Oh my goodness.
So anyway,
that means you were cool, I think, right?
Well, I don't know. They called him D.O.B.O. the Big Wheel from Austinville. So we had those nicknames, and that's why they called me Herman. And fortunately, I lived it down when I got into the service. My DI started calling me Bob, and I had no choice. He weighed 262 pounds, wore a size 14 boot. Can remember that very well. And so anyway, one of my favorite books is Moby Dick, Captain Queeg, and all that bunch. And Herman Melville opens the book with "Call Me Ishmael." So I was trying to come up with a name for this book, and I just thought, with all the teasing that I put up with all those years as Herman the German, and I have my 67th class reunion September 22nd, and when I go over there, everybody's like, "Hey, Herman, come on in, here's Herman." You know, so I'm Herman again for at least 4 or 5 hours. And so that's why I named the book Call Me Herman. And I got out of it during the Korean War, and got started calling Bob, but still nobody in Decatur calls me Bob. I'm always Herman. And they called all my sisters Little Herman, 4 of them. For 14 years, that name hung in Decatur High School with one of my sisters.
So are your brothers? Are you the only boy, right?
I'm the oldest and only.
So are your sisters still alive?
Only the youngest.
Okay.
3 of them are gone. So sad. But my youngest sister is a retired physicist, and and she was with Intergraph and went up the ladder,
Wow.
and she lives in Decatur. And my other middle sister just passed away. My second sister went up the ladder at Mutual Savings all the way to the top a woman could go to. And she came down with multiple sclerosis, and it was severe and ruined her career. Well, all of us were born overachievers because we didn't have anything but achievement.
Well, was that pretty commonplace in that time and where you lived, that people, they had to just do whatever to survive? Or?
Oh yeah, we survived very well during the Depression. My grandfather leased a dairy in Huntsville. We're from Madison County, 8 generations back to George Washington.
Okay.
And Owens Crossroads and
Yeah.
New Hope. That's where my ancestors are buried. Anyway, my grandfather entered into a lease with this man named Bean, and he had 36 cows, and he rented the cows and the dairy at a monthly rent. It wasn't sharecropping, it was rent. He got the big house, and the Depression came, and fortunately he was on this dairy and had a long-term lease. And there were 4 servants' houses on the dairy, and we moved into one of those houses, as did my other uncles. And I was there when TVA ran the electricity through the Tennessee Valley. And I remember watching them run it in our house. And before, it was out on Pulaski Pike, and before we had electricity, my mother and I would sit out on the porch at night and look toward Huntsville and see the sign on Russell Erskine Hotel, the Russell Erskine Hotel. It would flash on and off. And just as a child, I would say that, and then we got lights, and it was like a miracle. But we lived well then, and my father was always an impetuous man. He graduated from Bethel College with a degree in finance, played baseball at Memphis for several years, and then went to Huntsville, and he was from Gurley. My grandfather's Presbyterian minister there 40 years. And he got a job with Tennessee Valley Bank and went up the ladder and became vice president. And then Black Friday came and the banks closed. He didn't wait around for them to open on Monday. He went and got a job on the railroad.
Wow.
And stayed there 70 years. But he was impetuous like that, and so he was going up the ladder. He had 160 IQ. He's a genius. And he was going up the ladder real quick in the railroad, and so he became a baggage master, and he had to move to Sheffield, which was a division office. And we moved to Sheffield, and from there we moved to Tuscumbia, and all the time he was with the railroad. And then in 1941, he had an accident in Huntsville and became disabled until I was a senior in high school. And during that time, I had him to raise, and I had the girls to raise, and my mother and I had a pretty rough time, but no complaints. I made it. Learned a lot along the way, picked my share of cotton, tended stokers, did whatever was necessary to make a buck.
Yeah.
You were a paper boy at one time or something.
I was a paper boy. I was not just a paper boy. I had 360 papers in the morning, the Birmingham Post, and in the afternoon I threw the Decatur Daily 360 papers.
Wow.
So I was out at
That's a lot
4
of
o'clock
papers.
every morning and in at night at about 7 and study, do whatever I had to do, and take a bath and go to bed, get back up and go again. Then I got a job in a grocery store as a delivery boy, making $18 a week.
A lot of money then, though.
Yeah, it
wasn't
was a lot of money. It was wartime, and people didn't have gasoline, didn't have tires, so you had to deliver their groceries to them. So the minute I got out of school, I would run to the store and deliver groceries until late into the night. Then in the summer, I delivered them all day long. And then I discovered caddying at the golf course, and that changed my life. So I know hard work.
Yeah, but that's what builds character.
Yeah, well, down on Pepper's Creek one day, they had come out with, what's that guy's name that sells the My Pillow?
The My Pillow
Mike.
guy.
Mike.
And I love that pillow, by the way.
Yeah,
Free advertising.
I have one, and I even bought the bed thing. Mike Liddell.
That's it.
Anyway, he advertised this Egyptian cotton.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I was there when that cotton, after development in Egypt, came to America, and it came to North Alabama, and we called it short staple Egyptian cotton. The stalks only grew about that high, and the cotton was about that long in the hull, which was unbelievable because until they came out with that, anybody who picked cotton had bloody fingers.
Tell me about it.
All right, you know.
You get a pair of those black cotton gloves, and by lunchtime you'd have holes all in them.
Oh, I couldn't afford gloves. I just had bloody hands.
Oh, bless your heart.
Well,
So Frankie was in the rich part of town.
Yeah, she was rich
We
to
had
have gloves.
gloves.
Well, anyway, this cotton would only grow that high, and it would have about 4 or 5 bolls on it, but it had long staple.
But boy, that would be hard to pick, being that short.
Well, there was no way to pick it. You couldn't bend over long enough to pick it. And when I was picking, I had to pick 3 rows at a time. And so the only thing to do, I had to make the basketball team in order to be issued a pair of knee pads so I could put the knee pads on under my overall.
Oh, you had
Thinking
that
ahead.
trial.
Thinking ahead.
I see.
Huh?
Thinking ahead.
Yeah, I got those knee pads, and I would get down on my knees and pick on this and pick on this and pick on this one. My mother had sewed 2 cotton sacks together for me, which I didn't have to go to the wagon. I could get over 100 pounds in my bag.
Oh my goodness.
So, well, you know, dragging that weight to the wagon and taking your away from picking cost you money.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, long story short, they came out with that long staple short Egyptian cotton. And I had picked out, going out that morning, I picked very well, way across a quarter. And I had reached Pepper's Creek. And by then it was noontime. We didn't worry about noon because we couldn't afford to eat anything anyway.
Well, might as well.
So I get down to the creek and I turn around and I'm burning up, sunburned horribly, and I just started crying. And I was in the 10th grade, and tears, I can still remember them dropping in the red clay and making little stars. And I said, Lord, if you'll give me the strength to pull this sack to the way wagon, I'll never pick cotton again as long as I live. And I started dragging it, and I almost 240s by then. It was almost half a mile. And I dragged that thing to the wagon, and Mr. Isley, the farmer, said, well, Robert, you're quitting awfully early. I said, yes, sir, I'm quitting, I'm through. He said, well, let's weigh you out. And I had 137 pounds. I got $3.50 a 100. So he paid me, and I started to leave, and he says, hey, Robert, you're leaving your sack. I said, I intended to, Mr. Isley. You give it to some other poor guy. So I went into town and got me a job firing a stoker.
So which was worse?
Yeah, I had to walk to town. Well, that cotton picking, I never would do that again. That picking that short cotton was just too tough. But some of those women could bend over and just grab it. There was a guy named Castor Lott. He could pick 200 pounds, but highest I ever got was 178 pounds. I couldn't pick.
That's a lot of cotton.
It
And
was
that
a lot
was
of cotton.
picking cotton, not pulling bowls.
No, they did not discover pulling bowls till after I had quit.
Oh, okay.
They didn't pull bowls when I was a boy. They started maybe 2 or 3 years later, after I was a senior in high school. They started pulling bowls.
Well, I've done both.
Yeah, I've never
And
pulled
the
bowls.
pulling bowls is easier.
Well, I would think so, but I never had that opportunity. If you got out of school for 3 weeks in October, and there were no green bowls, you know, the cotton was ripe and ready for picking. And across North Alabama over at Decatur in that old clay, that cotton would just grow like wild.
I never picked cotton. My granddad had cotton on one of his farms, you know, but there was a machine that would come by. And
Well, I can assure you, you
I
haven't
wouldn't
missed
have
a
liked
thing.
it.
You wouldn't have liked it at all. When we had the
I don't know. I'd have been ambitious like you. I would have been like, no, wait a minute now. Who's picked the most cotton?
I didn't like it, but
You would get over that real quick,
Would I?
let me tell you.
well, you know, a pair of shoes cost about $5 a quarter. My mother would say, "Son, get out there and pick hard."
Yeah.
And I would. I'd get out there and pick enough during those 3 weeks to buy school clothes. And I remember so vividly buying 4 pair of shoes, one for me and one for my 3 sisters. A baby sister hadn't been born at that time.
Now, your mom was pretty ambitious too.
Oh, my mom was something. Oh, that's what I dedicate my book to, the women in my life. This book is dedicated. My life is dedicated to the magical women who influenced me. My mother, Nana Lois French, my wife, Celeste French, my daughters, Michelle French and Tammy Pruitt, my granddaughters, Caitlin Pruitt and Victoria French, and Karen Holcomb, my companion in my twilight years. So that's who the book is dedicated to.
So what was your mom like?
My mama was a very tall woman. She was 5'9". My father was 5'6", and people said they looked like Mutt and Jeff. She wouldn't wear high heels because it made her look so much taller than him. And in his darkest days, she would tell me, "He's not the man I married, but I love him just the same." And he wasn't. He was like a child. So, and if he wandered away from home, he'd get lost, and I'd have to go find him. So that was a mess. But my mother, it was so sad that she had to work as hard as she did. And she, even though she was a college graduate, she couldn't make enough money called working in the office. For women back then, she had to work on production in a spinning mill. And we didn't have a car. I bought our first car. And she would have to walk to work. And she had to work on midnight shifts, so she had to walk through town 3 miles to the mill to work. And I have an account in here. I can't remember what it's called, but she was accosted. She always carried a straight razor. And she would have used it, I can tell you. She was accosted by a black man one night, and he asked her, he said, "Missy, where you going?" and all that stuff. She said, "I'm going to get this razor stropped. It's not sharp enough."
Did that send a message?
That sent a message. He said, "Well, I sure hope you get it sharp enough, because I sure would hate to have it working on me." That was the only time she had that close call, but I felt so sorry for her as hard as she worked. And I said I had no regrets. There is, and I don't regret it because I learned a great lesson, really. On my paper routes, when I had 2 of them, and I delivered them on a bike that my mother bought me for $5, and I fixed it up and painted it. And anyway, back before the war, I had tasted a chocolate milkshake. Never tasted anything that good in my life. On the square in Huntsville at T.T. Terry's drugstore. That store is in here too. We were selling scrap iron to the Japs. When my uncle got all shut up on Iwo Jima, we were taking him through Huntsville home, from the hospital train. They call me preacher because, well, I lectured everybody and wouldn't eat without praying and all that
So
stuff.
shocked
What?
that you would be called preacher.
Oh, okay. Well, anyway, my Uncle Ira's laying on the stretcher. My daddy and two uncles are carrying the stretcher. And we're crossing Home Street at the post office. And my uncle looked up at me and he said, "Preacher, you remember that scrap iron we sold to the Japs?" I said, "Yes, sir." He said, "I brought some of it back." So anyway, the whole story there of selling scrap iron to the Japs, and what was my initial? Growing old is the greatest adventure of all, and what was I talking about? I
You
lost it.
talking about regrets. You said
Oh
you
yeah,
had
my
no
regret.
regrets.
Okay, my regret. I had to tell you, I tasted a chocolate malt. Never tasted anything that good in my life. And the Japs gave me a yo-yo. We never had heard of such a thing. We thought we had only had tops. But anyway, I'm collecting off my paper route, and every week I would collect anywhere from $12 to $15. So I was with this guy named Clarence Thomas. Clarence Campbell. He finished up at the same time I did and lived in West Town. We were going to walk home together. It was Saturday. We'd collected on our routes, and I had $13.75. So he said, Herman, have you ever had a milkshake? I said, "No, I haven't." He said, "Well, Mayflower makes chocolate malts." I said, "How much are they?" He said, then I remembered before the war. And here we'd been through this war and I hadn't had anything sweet. So we had to sweeten stuff with Cairo syrup. So anyway, he said, "This Mayflower's got the best chocolate malt in the world. Let's go get one." I said, "How much are they?" 25 cents. I felt all that change in my pocket. Nobody's gonna know. So I take out a quarter and go in, and we sit down at the counter. I pay for my chocolate malt, and my mother walks in.
Oh no. No.
She did not say a word. She looked at me, shook her head, and turned around and walked out, walking home. Well, I finished up my chocolate malt. It didn't taste quite so good then. And when I got home, I did what I always did, picked out all my money and put it on the kitchen table. She said, "You just keep it now. You may need it to buy another chocolate malt."
Ooh.
It upset me so bad that I had disappointed my mother, because I never disappointed my mother. So I went for a walk, and I walked all the way down to the housing project, which was about a half mile away, and then walked back. And when I came back, the money was gone off the table and everything was forgiven. But I never did that again.
We do that as mothers. Yeah, but you were probably thinking, she probably thinks I do this every day.
No, she knew me. She raised her boy right, and I told her Clarence Campbell talked me into it. Clarence Campbell also taught me into riding a mule that I got bucked off of and had a brain concussion for 3 days.
Well, you need to stay away from him.
I'm telling you. They tested me for 2 weeks when I was in the service, see if my brain was okay because of that. It was okay.
Is it important as parents to see who your kids are hanging out with?
Oh, definitely. We tried our best to watch ours. We never had to worry about Michelle. She was hard to hang out with anyway because she was married to music. But we watched pretty closely on Tammy and Tommy, yeah. But my mother didn't have time to watch me. She had 4 children and later 5. And she had those girls to put up with. And she would say that I was a lot easier to raise than they were. And I worked all the time. She knew I was working. I wouldn't get in trouble, wouldn't steal anything or break into anything. Deeply religious. Never had a Christ saving experience because I was born a Christian. And so I never had that. I did have the baptismal experience when I was 7 years old, but we were always a very devout family. My grandfather was a preacher. My great-grandfather was a preacher. And my mother read the Bible every night. And later on, when we got bigger, we had to memorize portions of the Bible. For example, let's see one, 12th chapter Romans. I beseech ye therefore, brethren, by the mercies of God, that ye present your body as a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable unto God, which is your reasonable service. Thank you.
There you go.
But we memorize the Christmas story, and I memorized a lot of Isaiah. Isaiah 53, 6 and 7 were very favorites of mine. And let's see, I was trying to remember, well, anyway, I never tasted alcohol till I was 31 years old because of the Bible verse, wine is a mocker, strong drink is raging, he who is deceived thereby is not wise. Are we through?
No, we still got plenty of time.
Well, yeah, so I was a very devout person and went to church every Sunday that I could, and even if I had to go in rags with holy shoes, I still went. And I lived by one rule that the only person really whose opinion about me counted was mine. My mother taught me that.
I think that's a good one.
Well, that's what I live by and still do. I don't pay any attention to what anybody says about me. They can claim I'm Judy Neely's baby's father. Whatever they want to say, I don't care. Just get my name right. Yeah, just
I was going to ask you, do you mind talking about your book about Judith Neely?
No, I don't mind.
I have never heard it from the source.
Well, it's still selling well, and hopefully it's going to pick up very shortly.
Folks, you can find it at Amazon.com.
Yeah. Yeah, you can get it at Amazon.com.
You have a website too, don't you?
Yeah, I have a few copies, not many, but they send me some to get my promotional money back. And I've got, I got maybe 20 or 30 copies. They're $20 a piece. And
how did it fell into your lap to have to defend her?
I was
right?
ordered to take it. I'm a Republican. I was the only Republican in law school.
Wow.
You ticked somebody off is what happened.
Oh, I got my first capital case 12 days after I got my license. I had Judy Neely was my 17th free murder defense at my expense. Now they pay them. And back in those days, the judge would have to call up lawyers and say, you come over here this minute, you're going to have to take an appointment. Oh, please, judge, not me. You've got to, it's your civic duty. And you'd go over and you'd take it and act like you liked it. Well, since Judith Ann Neely and the mess I went through, the legislature started paying lawyers, and now they're packed out every plea day. They come from Gadsden and Scottsboro. They all mixed together, trying to get those appointed cases for that money. I wouldn't do that on a bet. Because you know what? Once they started paying lawyers, I never got one. I defended the man who raped the virgin daughter of the president of Auburn University on a 10-minute notice. And
You had 10 minutes to prepare.
I had 10 minutes to prepare, and I told the judge, he let the Democrat off who'd been paid $2,500 who hadn't been paid the other $25. So he calls the Republican and told me to get over there that I had to defend this man in 10 minutes. I said, what's his name? He told me his name. I said, well, I never have heard of him. What's he charged with? Rape, and it's ugly. So I said, well, you need to get somebody else. I've still got this case, that case. That's free. He said, you've got 8 minutes. You'd better hurry. So I went over there and shook hands with the guy, and I said, how did this happen? He said, well, I pretended to be a policeman and put a blue light on her. she was going back to camp up here, and I took her out in the woods and did it to her. So
he admitted it, and then you got to defend.
I got him 10 years. The jury said it then, and unfortunately I destroyed the young girl. Didn't want to, but she shouldn't have smoked marijuana. You know, you gotta do what you gotta do. But in my book, Beaten, Battered, and Damned, the Drano murder trial, it opens with the murder, and then shifts to him calling me and telling me, "You've got to defend this girl." And I said, "What girl?" "You know, the little girl that's here in jail for shooting that child, pushing her in the canyon." I said, "I can't defend her. It joins my farm out there. I own 2,300 feet of that canyon. Raised my children out there. I'm not going out there." And I said, and this was true, I said, "Celeste had been going around town since they put a composite of her in the paper, seeing if she can find her." And that was true. Well, he said, "I'm sorry, but you're going to have to do it." He said, "It's really a compliment because I'm finding you to be the most competent man here to defend this high-profile case. You can handle the publicity and you can handle defending her." I said, "I can't do it. I still got the hippie murder case on appeal where he killed his mother and father up here at Brook Subdivision, dressed like a hippie, came in from California, killed him in cold blood for no reason." Anyway, I was forced to take that case at my own expense, and so then he says, "Well, you're going to have to take it." And I said, "I'm not going to take it." He says, "I'm going to call David Ware and ask him to take it, and if he won't take it, you're going to take it, or I'm going to enter an order, and you know that will be ugly by your name." So I said, "Why are you calling David Ware? He closes loans. He's never defended a capital case in his life." I said, "All you're doing is setting me up." He said, "You've got to take the case or I'm entering the order in the next 10 minutes. I said, "Well, I have no choice. I can't let you do that to me." I said, "Has she made a statement?" "Well, I think she made one some time ago. She made one 18 minutes before he called. She confessed." So I go over and meet this big old pregnant woman, ugly as could be, couldn't zip up her pants. And I didn't like her and she didn't like me. And that's what started it. And nowadays when people, I had to wait 30 years to write that book. That's how painful it was on me and my family. And I get a kick out of these people who throw rocks at me because of it, and they still do. You can mention my name, people, "Oh, that was Judy Neely's boyfriend." Well, that was started by Democrats at a county committee meeting in Grove Oak, and I know who started it.
And they still do that.
And
I
they
mean, that's
still
their
say,
tactic,
"Oh,
isn't
yeah,
it?
they believe it." But you know why they believe it? Because they want to believe it. And so I don't care.
Well, my parents got a divorce during this trial, and I remember going to the courthouse because we all had to go to court because of all this divorce stuff going on. And I remember there were news like ABC, NBC, all these were at the courthouse in Fort Payne, Alabama.
13 of them. London Daily Mail, Istanbul Express, New York Times, all of them.
And I was trying to hurry up and run and get inside.
Well,
the court.
they would start gathering out there at 4:30 in the morning to get a seat. People would. Then if you got up to go to the bathroom or to eat lunch, you could not get anybody to hold your seat. And people were waiting to rush in and grab up a seat.
So she had already admitted that she did the murder.
Why she
before
she couldn't confess enough. She wanted to free her husband. That's all she wanted to do was so he wouldn't be found guilty. Why she confessed to killing her, confessed to shooting John Hancock, confessed to killing his wife, confessed all of it. She confessed in Murfreesboro, where they arrested her. That's where she was from. And then she confessed down here. She couldn't confess enough. And she'd tell me it's not his fault, it was all my fault. I said, yeah, I guess you put the semen in those women. He raped every one of them, all night long, all day long. 13-year-old girl, big old 260-pound man raping her, horrible, just horrible. But I didn't hear all of that until the trial. Of course, I surmised it because I saw pictures. He bit her in the arm and left the imprint of every tooth in his mouth in there. Scars. She still carries it. It was tough, but the profitable thing that came out of it was a battered woman syndrome. Dr. Charles Ewing of Syracuse University and I coined that phrase in my office. You'd never heard of it until then, December 1983 by then. And you would never have heard of it, but we came up with that name. We were trying to figure out Patty Hearst and Stockholm Syndrome. And we couldn't figure it out. And we kept talking it out, bouncing back and forth. And finally, one of us, I don't know which one of us said it, these women are battered. They just get the stuffing beat out of them. They're battered.
But they won't leave.
No. So he said, one of us said, battered woman, that's what she is. She's a battered woman. And he said, yeah, but it's not a sickness, it's a syndrome. Let's figure the legs to the syndrome. We sat down and counted 14 points that involve the battered woman who stays in the situation. And
well, see, we're on the outside looking in, and we see women get battered, and our thoughts, well, just leave. But there's something else.
yeah, well, it's part of the syndrome that they can't leave.
It's a loss of self.
Loss of
Self-esteem.
self-respect. It's a loss of that. They cover up the bruises with long sleeves. They hide the hair pulling with caps. You know, there will be 30 million women in America go to bed tonight after being hit by a man, and it's swept under the rug. It's just like the killings every weekend in Chicago, swept under the rug. Don't matter, just sweep it under the rug and go on. So we developed that, and now I think I told you the story that I was at the bar convention earlier this month, and a lawyer came up to me and said, oh, I was so wishing you would be here because I wanted to meet you. Said, I used your defense of battered woman syndrome and I saved a woman Friday. And we owe it all to that case.
So as bad as that was, think about, I mean, that's...
Well, the good came out of it.
It did.
And the best part about it is it broke me. I spent everything I had and everything I could borrow, $340,000, then had to go into Chapter 11 bankruptcy where I had to pay all my debts, $565,000. I paid them off, all of them, in 32 months, and went into my old age debt-free and rich.
Well, I've just got to ask this question, and this is for the rest of us out there. When someone admits they've done something like that, why do you still have to have a trial?
Because somebody's got to find them guilty. You can go and admit anything, but you can be lying about it. I mean, how many people get a husband or wife in prison, go tell the judge they didn't do it, I did it, I'm willing to confess? You can confess, but you still have to have a trial. And that's why they have the Miranda decision, and that's why they have the written confession.
Remind me, who actually did it? Was it Judith Ann Neely or
She
her
did
husband?
it.
She did it.
In my book, there is a chapter where he comes, I should have brought it in, I have a copy in the car. He comes home, he's in prison. He makes her go to the judge and confess that he didn't do it, but she did it and she should go to prison. The judge believed that and let him out of prison in just a few days on parole. Now the judge is putting her to trial for it. But he comes in and beats her. When he got out of prison, he accused her of having relations with black men. He beat her until he beat the soul out of her. Then he urinated in her mouth. He did the worst. If you read my chapter on that beating, and I only listened to it at the trial, I got it out of the transcript. She testified to it, of what he did and how bad he beat her. And it's how she lived through it, I'll never know. But,
Is she still alive today?
yeah, she's in prison. Yeah,
How old is she now?
Oh, I have no idea. I haven't spoken to her in 30 years.
Oh, okay.
The funny thing about it was that, or it wasn't funny, the judge who made me take it, and I won the case. If you're trying a capital case and your client doesn't get the chair, you win it. You just got life in prison. The jury came in and gave her life in prison. And the guy who made me take it raised it to death by electrocution. And how I got out of that, you'll have to read my book.
Yeah, but you know, here's what when I analyzed this, to me it sounds like a political hack job against you.
Well, that's what
Am I right?
that's what one of the judges who read my book said. I read your book about the Drano trial, but it's not Drano trial. It's a book about Alabama politics.
Yeah, that's exactly what I got out of it.
Well, the last line of it, I think, is sort of precious. I was glad I came up with it. I was standing at the Monroeville courthouse in Monroeville with Carrie. We were attending the writer seminar. I'd been invited to the symposium. And we were standing there looking at the white famous tower that Gregory Peck made famous. She said, now tell me again what you went through in that Neely case. And I went through the litany of the horrors. And she said, you know, you're the real life Atticus Finch. In the last line of my book. No, French and Finch just sound alike. Atticus Finch was a Democrat.
Oh, there you go. But now we're seeing this happen out during the Kavanaugh trial.
Oh, yeah.
We saw it was just a hack.
It's just a hack.
Lies. And Judge Roy Moore. And I'll have to tell you, I always want to hear the woman. I always want to
listen, I voted for him, and I would support him this time if he could get elected, but he can't. The Democrats would spend $5 billion to defeat him again, and we'd have more of them come out from under the rug. All of them have proven that nothing happened.
Well, and then when Gloria, what did it for me is when Gloria Allred, she's sitting here with the person who's saying that, you know, she was mistreated, and she's holding a book and she's doing this and she's pointing and showing the woman what to say. Had it really happened to me, I would have said, I don't need your book. I would have looked right into the camera and I would have said exactly what happened. You wouldn't have to tell me what to say.
Yeah.
That's when I knew it was all a fraud.
Well, it was a total fraud. It was real sad.
But he paved the way for Kavanaugh, I think.
Well, yes, they learned a lesson. They learned you can win by smearing somebody with something 14 years old. And they smeared more. The women, where are the women now? Why aren't they still filing lawsuits or something?
No, I would be if it happened to me. I'd still be happy.
Moore sued them, and they're running for the hills. But the whole thing is that if Moore if he wins the primary, Jones will be reelected. Because they'll spend the money to do it. They'll buy the votes.
They've got the money. Where's all this money coming from?
Out of the givers of hate Trumpers. Lord, you got the Trump derangement syndrome. It's very powerful. But
but that's Republicans too. You got Republicans in there?
You don't have to tell me they're not Republicans. They're rhinos. Republicans in name only.
Right.
So. No, I feel sorry for Moore because I've been smeared. I was smeared good, and like you say, people still believe I'm the father of that baby that was born 2 months after I met her. You know, so I always said he must be the second coming because he's a miracle.
You know what's so sad is that a young lady lost her life, and all of the things that have come in to take away from that one fact.
It's horrible.
The
It
projection
overshadows
here and there.
that.
Yeah,
It-
that's really sad.
Oh, it's so sad, and this child was so abused, and to make it worse, she was a runaway from an orphanage
Oh my goodness.
on a window shopping trip
Oh,
for orphan girls,
sad.
and they lured her in the car and he raped her for 72 hours and then ordered her killed. And of course, I owned the first privately owned property south of 35. My farm, I had a 55-acre farm. I used to have a cabin on it. Somebody was kind enough to burn it. But I raised my kids out there. I had a creek on it, and I had 2,300 feet of the canyon that I owned to the middle of. And it's Eagle Point, if you ever want to look. And I loved that place, and I farmed it. I cucumber farmed it when they made me the chairman of the produce market, and I didn't know anything about it. But I had to save the market, so I grew cucumbers out there. And I would take my kids and we'd pick muscadines and make wine, and we'd go to the creek and pan for gold and tell them all kind of stories. We'd wander down as far into the canyon as I ventured to with them because they were small. And I raised all three of my children on that farm. I had a big hay loft and barn, and when she killed that child and I was made to defend her, neither me nor my family wanted to go back to the farm. I sold it to Randy Owen. He's let it grow up.
Well, you could have no privacy. I'm sure people were just constantly trying to come to your house.
Oh, well, they rocked my house and all that stuff. So I grabbed my gun. I won't say what kind of gun it was because I don't want anybody to know I own guns.
They know now.
So anyway, I grabbed my gun and ran out and fired up at Celeste. I went, "Bob, don't kill him. Don't kill him, Bob. They're just throwing rocks." So I went out and fired one shot up in the air, and that's the last rock throwing at my house. But it didn't stop them from picking in my office with signs. And it was bad.
It was. But you know something? Bob is also an artist. Did you know that?
I saw something on Facebook just recently.
Yeah. They painted another portrait of his wife, Celeste.
Yeah. But anyway, have I worn you girls out?
No.
This has been so
We could talk for
interesting. I can't
hours.
wait for you to come back.
Well, I'll be happy to.
I want to hear more.
Well, you'll have to read my book.
Yeah, but you told her more than you told me, Bob.
Yeah. Well, you read Beaten, Battered, and Down.
Yeah, but I haven't read this one.
Well,
I've been
that one-
asking you all kinds of questions about
well,
this.
this one will be out.
But I'm gonna. Yeah, you've got to read.
Well, Bob, I'm on Medicare now, and my eyes are going too, so
Really?
I can't read like I
Oh,
used to.
that's too bad.
So I'll have to hear it from you.
Well.
Hey, she wants you to come and read it to her.
Oh,
No,
my.
I just like to.
Put it on tape.
I like to listen. I'm a listener.
Well, they've been asking me to do an audio of it.
That'd be
You
great.
should.
I don't know whether I will or not. They asked me to, Amazon featured it for 4 hours. I wish they'd have featured it for a whole day. But I don't know. They wanted me to do the one where you look at the screen and read it. What's that called?
Prompter.
What is it?
A prompter.
No. It's you read the book on the screen.
Oh, okay. I see what you're talking about. Put it
You
on
got
audio.
this little thing. What?
Yeah, you.
You open it up and read the book on the screen.
Teleprompter.
Yeah, no, it's
That's what I said.
something
Oh, the
else.
tablet.
Yeah, the tablet, but you open it up and read the book. You only pay $2.50 for the book, and they send it to your
Yeah, it
Computer.
comes right to your
yeah,
Your
and then
book
you
or whatever.
then you read it. And boy, aren't we a crowd that can't even think of that? Now y'all aren't old enough to lose your mind like I do. But anyway, they've been wanting me to do that. I just really haven't gotten into that.
Well, all the young people are doing that though.
I know that, but
I mean, I like to turn pages of the
well, I
book.
do too.
Yeah.
I just hope the thing picks up and goes. I'm really hoping it will. It's got a good chance now.
Can you put it in large print?
It's in large print. I printed it in 8.5 by 11,
Oh, good.
so that you can read it without. It's in 16,
So
you can read it without your glasses.
good.
I did that.
Oh, I couldn't read it without my glasses, even with that.
Well, the second printing is small, but it's 12 font.
Okay.
But the original, and there's still one or two of them around, and they have the large print.
Now this book's coming out 9/11, right?
9/11, that's right. I'll have copies of it by then, and I'll have 100 copies that I can sell for $20 each and try to get my money back.
I want one and I want it signed.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, I sign them all. Yeah, because, you know, if, for example, if Beaten, Battered, and Damned goes, say it was my dream and it became a bestseller, yours would be worth a lot of money because you have one of the early editions. Because the next edition would be in hardback with a jacket and all that stuff. But the reason I printed it the way I printed it, I wanted to sell it for $20. If it had been in hardback, it'd have sold for $38.50. So.
Now you're both writers because
Yeah,
Frankie's a singer and she writes songs and,
I know.
and by the way, he loves Slip Away.
Oh,
When Slip
that's a
Away
good
came
song.
on before the
That's
show,
a
he
good
was.
song.
he
Well,
was
I've heard it on
dancing
my
to it.
radio. Yeah, it's really
Thank
good.
you.
Yeah,
I love doing it, or I still wouldn't be doing it after all
I
these
know.
years.
I know. You get to the point where you have to do it.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
not a question of whether
Oh,
you
it's
want
always
to.
been that way for me. I
Yeah,
have to
well,
do it.
that's me with my painting. I've painted all my life, but only when I have to. I have paintings in my office that were done in 1965.
I don't have the discipline to paint. I took art in college and I have several started.
I don't know.
Yeah,
I've
I
seen
just
you with a
don't have
roller
the-
brush in here painting before.
I have never had a lesson. I have just always been able to look at something and draw it.
My sister was like that.
Yeah, I can look at anything like that umbrella there. I could draw that in a New York second, just from the shapes. And then after I get it drawn, I color it.
How do you have time to paint?
Whenever it
Do
hits
you
me,
ever sleep?
yeah. Whenever it hits me, I can't do anything but paint. But it don't hit me that often.
Okay, I've got a success question to ask you. How many hours do you sleep per night?
6. Yeah.
That's about what I sleep.
Yeah.
That's what they say the most successful people.
When you get old, you get up and about 2 or 3 times a night, and then my work gets in bed with me, and
Yeah.
my possible books get in bed with me, and I may lay there 2 or 3 hours and drop back off. Fortunately, when I want to, I can sleep as late as I want. If I don't have court, I can sleep as late as I want to.
I
Which
don't
is
sleep late.
what time? What time do you normally get up?
6:30. I'm up just about every morning at 6:30.